But now I had the absolute direction, love all, serve all. And this is the way I ran my business, and I would get up and talk about divine beings, because at this point I realized that we were all divine beings. I believe this. And that we're all brothers and sisters, and we're all joined together, and there is an afterlife, and there are many lives, and all these definitions started to arrive into my life. And I had to get back there, and because you found him, and so the first chance I got, I flew back again, and this time he was
How much time later did you fly back?
It was probably about 5 or 6 months. And I could leave again. I only went for a week, and now he was at his ashram, which is in this very remote part of the poorest part of India, in a state called Andhra Pradesh, which is very arid and very, very poor, to say the least. And this is where he was born.
A few oases like this here.
Yes, well, this is new and wonderful, and that's why we're here. But it took in those days 7 hours to get here. The main north-south road. This is before India exploded over the last 10 or 15 years. This is back in 1974. And it washed out roads, and it was unbelievable.
Ox carts.
It was all ox carts, all
hotels.
And anyway, I came when there was this big white temple, and there was a sand in front of it and a little wall around it, and there were about 100 rooms, and there was a little main street which had an accommodation office and a bookstore and a few little things, and there was really nothing here. And I sat there, and there were only like 150 men on the men's side and 150 men on the women's side, and he completely ignored me. After this pulling for years, and then designating, you are the one, we're old friends, we have much work to do, and he completely ignored me.
And you still stuck out as probably the only Westerner, or were there already
There were actually, this is when I think the real push came with all the hippies, and they were coming to Goa, and they were living on the beaches of Goa, and they were coming to India, all because of the Beatles, primarily, in this super consciousness or change of consciousness, which LSD, which was the dropout drug, and so forth. So everybody was coming over this way. So there were a lot of hippies here at the time. They were the only Westerners, and then a lot of the Indians, and mostly the villagers that were around, and surrounding villagers. And he gives this darshan where he comes out twice a day, every day since he was 14. And he walks through the crowd, he talks to people, and he takes their letters and so forth. But when he got to me, he would make a wide turn, and I was shattered. And I left after a week, and that's all I could stay. And he didn't look at me or come near me. In fact, he avoided me like the plague. And then I came back again, and it happened again. And I came back again, and it happened again. And he was interviewing and talking to everyone else but me in the whole place. And I remember them saying, it's because that boy, he's a sinner, he sells meat, alcohol, all these different things. They had a reason why, but I knew he was the one. I knew that after my ego was finally shattered after 2 or 3 visits, I actually discovered that what he was doing was giving me a boon, which is a gift, and they talk about it in all the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and all that. He was giving me a gift because he wanted me to travel on the inward journey and discover the formless rather than being distracted by the form. So when I realized he was never going to look at me and he wasn't going to talk to me, I came here whenever I could. I'd stay a week, I'd stay 2 weeks. One time in '76 I stayed for 3 or 4 months, and again all I did was read the books because I wanted to, he was directing me to not be distracted by him and the delusion of the possibility that this could be a realized being or something different than me, but to understand my own divinity. And these books that I read were everything that he had written and other masters, from Yogananda to Ramakrishna to the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana and all these other books. And for 15 years he never spoke to me. Never looked at me, never spoke to me, nothing. And they were the grandest years of my education, because he was not going to let him, everyone is practicing duality, which is how we fell from the garden when the mind-body experience became overstimulated. Suddenly we thought God's over there and I'm over here, and that's why we're in such a mess now. And but he wasn't going to let that happen to me. He wasn't going to let me be distracted. And so I learned from my studying and again this continuous reminding that there is something else going on, which was still being broadcast and happening to me, which forced me to continue to read and learn. I discovered the formless nature of the superconsciousness, as I call it.
So 15 years later, what happened?
Well, 15 years went by. During that time, there were things that occurred which, of course, as I tell these stories, people will say that is absolutely impossible, or I've never heard of such a thing, or it can't be true, or the guy must have been delusional. But I guess I needed it. The first instance happened in late 1974, and I was in Hollywood. I had a house in Malibu then. I was making a lot of money, so I had a home in the States, which was in the beach in Malibu, and one in England. And I was at a party, and got drunk out of my mind. I was taking something called Quaaludes, and I borrowed my partner's car, which was a brand new Porsche Targa, black with beige seats, and I literally left the party because I saw that I was getting almost unconscious, and I drove up actually to the Sunset Strip, which was not far away, and I realized I couldn't drive, and I parked in the parking lot behind a club there. Yeah, I think it was a Roxy or Whiskey A Go-Go, I can't remember. And I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I felt pretty good, and I thought I could handle it. And so I go zooming down the Sunset Strip all the way to the beach, to Highway 1. And when you get towards the end of Sunset, there's canyons and so forth. And I, at 80 miles an hour in this Porsche Targa with no seatbelt on, in a reverse camber turn, which is a turn that's almost impossible to make because of the way that, I fell asleep. And the next thing I know, this car was crashing and tumbling, and I woke up, of course, immediately, and this car was just going end over end and side over side, and I felt a presence next to me, and I looked next to me, and there was this guru, Sai Baba, sitting next to me. And the car continued to go over, the wheels were all blown off, the windshield was blown off, the front, the back end, it went over 12 times. Even the roll bar, which is supposed to protect, was bent down below my shoulders, and it ended up upright. And I just got out of the car. There wasn't a scratch, a bruise, a trauma, anything. And I go, I must have been imagining this. How could this guru be here? How could this be? I've read about this stuff, and this can't be true. This is insane. But I had no choice. You have no choice. I had to dive back in. I got on a plane immediately, flew to India 2 days later, sat in the sand that I've been sitting in for, at that point, a year or so, and he ignored me. I stayed there for a month. He ignored me the entire time, never looked at me. Later, about a year later, I broke up with the love of my life, this beautiful young girl, and I went on a wild binge. I'm known as, and was known as, a pretty wild young man, and even at 61, I'm pretty good at it.
Binge means, real.
I had it reckless, the love of my life. We had I won't go into the circumstances, but they were tragic, and it became a situation where I just had a little entourage, and I just started in London and went to New York, and just drugs and partying and everything from there. We went to Memphis. From Memphis, we went to St. Louis to Aspen, and I woke up. I'd been taking these Quaaludes. It was the drug of choice at the time, and somebody gave me a big bag of about 500 of the damn things, and I was up to taking like 20 of these things a day. And they would make you drunk and, funny and bizarre and
so
out of your mind.
So it's close to a lethal dose.
No, actually, you can't really overdose on them, which I found out later through this experience.
With other drugs, were you close to a lethal dose, to overdose?
You might have been able to kill yourself, but you'd have to take an awful lot of these things. And I was taking 20 a day at this point.
Yeah, but I mean other drugs, alcohol.
Drinking a little alcohol, but mainly taking these and alcohol. Those were, and marijuana, that was the drugs of choice at the time, and I was a professional. At any rate, I woke up one morning in Aspen, Colorado, on this now 3-week binge that had been traveling with this group of people, and this voice, the voice of Sai Baba, the one that I had only heard once when he said, "I've been waiting for you," he said, "You're going to die today." And it scared the daylights. I said, "It's those damn pills," and I took the methaqualone and I put them down the toilet. I immediately said, "I'm going to go back to Malibu," and I rushed out to the airport in Aspen. It was snowing. There were little planes to take you to Denver where you change planes, and I missed my connection. And I had to stay in a hotel near the airport, and I went and sat down. And what I didn't realize was that the thing that had been killing kids, because there had been lots of talk about methaqualone, which is the main drug in Quaaludes, is that when you have so much of it in your body, you have to slowly come off of it, or your body will contract and you will go into an epileptic seizure. And this is exactly what happened to me. I was sitting on the end of this bed and I turned on the TV, and suddenly my vision blurred and I lost my balance, and next thing I know I was in an epileptic seizure of some sort. I couldn't move my arms and legs. I fell on the floor. I swallowed my tongue, and last thing I remember was trying to make my hand reach to my mouth to pull out. It was a desperate move, because I said, all I have to do is just get my hand to my mouth and pull my tongue, because I was choking to death. And I couldn't do it. And on the floor of that hotel room in 74, 75, I choked to death and I died. And my spirit, as I had read about in these books, came right out of the top of my top chakra that supposedly leaves your body, your spirit, out of the top of your head. And the next thing I know, I'm in some form of electricity. There's probably about 2 people in the whole world that have ever had this experience that will see this, but God bless us all for having this experience, because it changed everything. Because I was dead and I died, and I was on the ceiling and I was looking down at my corpse, and I went, "What is that? What is that? I thought I was that. I'm this. What's this? I thought I was that, but I'm this." And I was in what is called the light body. I was in the spirit body, and I had a consciousness of who I was, but there was no 5 senses. And without the 5 senses, it's almost like you're in a state of peace. It was bliss. It was blissful. There was nothing that was facilitating your consciousness, because when you lose your 5 senses and they're all gone, and all you have is this super consciousness, and I knew who I was, I actually started laughing, because the whole experience was hilarious, because I was going, "Damn, I thought I was that. I'm not that at all. I'm this. This is amazing." And it was total bliss. And I just sat there in happiness, watching this scene from above. And suddenly, this little guru, Sai Baba, appeared in the room, and I'm watching this from above. And he picks up my body, and he puts it on the bed, and he presses on my chest. I'm watching this from above. As he presses on my chest, my spirit comes off the ceiling, goes back into the top of my head, into my body, and the next thing I know, I'm looking up at Sai Baba, who's standing over me with a big grin. And he brought me back from the dead. And I could assure any of you who are frightened of death, don't waste your time. It's wonderful. It's nothing to fear at all. It's incredible. It's a relief. And in fact, he took me out of bliss to bring me back here so I could do this interview with you. But when this happens to you, it's beyond comprehension, it's beyond belief, it changes everything. And immediately I got on a plane again the next day, and I go to India, and I sit out in the sand for 2 or 3 months. He doesn't talk to me, he doesn't pay any attention to me. But this experience, where literally I've been brought back from the other side, I realized that there were other dimensions, that there was an afterlife. There was no doubt in my mind. That there were other beings, that there was this thing of karma was actually possible, of living lifetime after lifetime. So all that started to fit together in a wondrous way, which, as Doc Peel said, you're going to have to define your spirituality. And the definition began. And this was an extraordinary thing for a young man to begin his journey in this wondrous way of being exposed to things that I can't convince anybody of. But I have no trouble convincing myself because I had the experience. And it led me to a joyous new look on life, and it led me to a feeling of service, and that the laws of physics say the first law for every action, there's an equal reaction. Well, the laws of metaphysics are identical. For every action, there's an equal reaction. This is what they call karma. Whatever you put out, you're going to get back. So suddenly you become very cautious about everything you do. And because I'm a loving person and a giving person by nature, it was very easy for me to then also realize that I don't see people really. I see beyond. As I even look at you, I see God. And I realize there's just something in my being. It's not an intellectual decision. There's something in my being that I feel, anyone that approaches me to this day, I feel honored. It's like God approaching. This great opportunity is approaching. And I feel it with every single person that I see and that I am blessed to commune with in any way. And this is something that is the greatest gift. This is the reason. This is the great discovery. This is the search. This is the end game. This somehow kept me, while part of my life was being rushed into materialism and all the senses being, overstimulated, and everything that you could ever dream of happening to you, and at the same time there was this other thing that was there that you may forget about it for a while, but it wouldn't leave you alone for very long. You would jump back and forth, and I still am. You and I had a conversation last night about a very important thing to me, and suddenly I couldn't sleep all night long. My mind immediately left me, and this other side came in. And even though I've had, and everyone has had a difficult life, and it's part of life, it's part of the experience. Our birthrights, as I told you, are pain, death, and bereavement. And it's so funny because 15 years later, when Sai Baba called me in for the first time, I thought he was talking to the guy behind me. And he called me in, and he said, "You have any questions?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do. I certainly do. Why was I born into a family where there was lovelessness, where there was death and violence and insanity and destruction and horror? Why was I born into a family like that?" And he smiled at me and he said, "Well, to soften your heart." And I realized, because when I walked in that room, I was carrying this bag of horror. I thought I was a cursed man for the life experiences that I'd had, which are very common to many people. I was convinced I was cursed. And when he said that, and there's something about these beings when they talk to you, and the dynamic truth is given, the word is given, and it goes far beyond your consciousness, I suddenly realized that I hadn't been cursed, I'd been blessed. because it made me what I am today. It gave me this innate ability to adore and love everyone. It gave me this totally empathetic mind that is empathetic with everything that goes on and everybody's pain and pleasure. And it gave me also this innate knowledge that I had a duty, and that this duty involved lots of people and lots of interaction, whether it was going this direction or that direction, or maybe I would end up by myself in a cave in India one day. But whatever it was, it became clear that my journey was going to be filled with this joy and the odd attempt at the intellect to understand the amazing divine nature of everything and how we're all connected, and everything is connected.